All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating, kind of dark, but ultimately empowering psychology of why crowds just freeze in emergencies. And to make this complex idea really stick, we're going to visualize it through a beautiful, soft papercraft world. So I want you to imagine an entire society populated entirely by paper-cut animals. Picture this. You're riding a packed subway train. Suddenly, our main character, let's say it's a delicate paper-cut cat, just collapses right there on the floor. It's clearly a medical emergency. Now you look around, the car is stuffed with other paper-cut animals, dogs, bears, rabbits, but nobody is moving. Everyone is just staring. What do? Do you jump up to help the cat, or do you kind of hesitate? Now, if you hesitated in that little thought experiment, honestly, do not feel bad. This right here perfectly captures the core concept we're talking about today, the diffusion of responsibility. It's this wild socio-psychological phenomenon where we are just way less likely to step up when other people are around. Those other animal passengers, they aren't evil, they aren't apathetic. Their personal sense of responsibility is literally just being sliced up and diluted by every single other person in that train car. To really get how this works, we have to look at the foundational science. Specifically, there's this super famous 1968 study by psychologists John Darley and Biblatane. They actually wanted to test this exact subway scenario, but in a controlled lab. So they put participants in isolated rooms where they could only talk over an intercom. Then, suddenly, one participant, who was actually just a pre-recorded voice, fakes a severe medical emergency, literally begging for help over the speaker. And the results are absolutely wild. When a person thought they were the only one hearing the victim, like a strict one-on-one situation, 85% of them instantly reported the emergency. But the moment they thought they were just one part of a 6-person group listening in, that number tanked to just 31%. So, going back to our papercraft world, our cat has an 85% chance of getting help from a lone witness, but in a crowd, those odds absolutely plummet. So what is actually happening in our brains here? Well, researchers map it out into the 5 stages of helping. Basically, you have to notice the event, interpret it as an emergency, assume responsibility, judge if you're actually capable of helping, and then act. But our paper-cut animals, they get completely stuck at stages 2 or 3. Because when a situation is confusing, we all look around to see what everyone else is doing. If the bear and the rabbit are just standing there, the dog naturally assumes, oh, I guess it's not a real emergency. Psychologists call this pluralistic ignorance. But it's not just basic psychology pulling the strings here. To really decode this freeze, we have to look at it through 6 different lenses: psychology, evolutionary biology, sociology, jurisprudence, neuroscience, and ethics. Let's rapidly fire through exactly why a crowd's instincts just shut down in that critical moment. First up, psychology and neuroscience. When our cat faints, boom, it's a sudden, super high-stress event. The bystanders' brains are suddenly flooded with a massive amount of data to process in mere milliseconds. Is this dangerous? What's everyone else doing? This cognitive overload literally paralyzes the brain's executive function. You default to social referencing, basically using the crowd as a benchmark. And if the crowd is frozen, your brain tells you to freeze too. Then we pull in sociology and evolutionary biology. Sociologically speaking, a crowded subway is what experts call a norm vacuum. It's just a bunch of isolated strangers with no real community bond, meaning there are 0 clear rules on how to behave. And biologically, well, getting involved is risky. Evolution hardwired us to do a lightning-fast cost-benefit analysis. If stepping out of the crowd to help a stranger might get us hurt, our primal survival instinct just screams, stay put. And finally, we have ethics and jurisprudence. The philosopher Wang Yanming actually talked about this. He argued that we all have this innate flash of conscience when we see someone suffering, this instant spark of pure good. But here's the tragic part. That spark is almost instantly smothered by selfish math. We think, wait, will I get sued? What if I mess up? Now, legally, some places do have laws forcing you to intervene, which kind of cuts through that hesitation. But ethically, it is a constant battle between our initial gut instinct to help and our secondary, selfish fears. Now, you might be wondering, what actually kicked off all this intense academic focus on the bystander effect in the first place? Well, it stems from a deeply shocking historical case, the 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in New York. The media back then reported that 38 neighbors literally watched from their windows as she was attacked for over half an hour, and not a single one called the cops. For decades, this was held up as the ultimate, terrifying proof that city life makes people cold and apathetic. But here is a massive plot twist. Honestly, it perfectly illustrates how myths spread like wildfire. 40 years after the tragedy, researchers dug back into the case and proved that the original reporting was incredibly fabricated. There were absolutely not 38 people just idly watching. Most only heard vague noises they thought was just an argument. And the evidence showed that at least 2 people did call the police, and one neighbor even ran out to hold her. The whole foundational story of the bystander effect, yeah, it was largely exaggerated just to sell newspapers. So, if the famous Genovese story was mostly a myth, are humans really that terrible in groups? Well, a groundbreaking cross-national study from 2020 gives us a surprisingly uplifting answer. Get this number, 90%. Researchers watched endless CCTV footage of public conflicts, and they found that in 90% of violent public incidents, at least one bystander, and usually more, stepped right in to help. When the danger is actually clear, people absolutely do take action. Okay, but before we celebrate too much, we have to talk about how this whole phenomenon has mutated today. Let's shift our metaphor for a second. Imagine our paper-cut cat isn't fainting on a physical train, but is instead getting viciously cyberbullied on a massive social media app. In the digital world, the crowd isn't just a train car, it's infinitely huge, and everyone is hiding behind anonymous avatars. And this is where the bystander effect gets really tricky. Look at this recent iWin data on cyberbullying. On the bright side, about 39% of people will report it, and 28% will support the victim. That is awesome. But a really concerning 19% just choose to completely ignore it. They figure, hey, digital diffusion of responsibility, someone else will flag it. And even worse, over 5% actually join in on the bullying. That digital distance makes it so much easier to silence our conscience. So, how do we fight back? How do we actually break that digital bystander spell? Well, educational experts suggest this awesome framework called In and Out, or the 2 Think, 3 Act rule. Basically, before you react online, you take a beat to think, identify the real information, and check if it's true. Then you act, stay aware of the context, express yourself without adding to the internet trash fire, and take concrete action to support the victim. Even something as simple as a private message to our cyberbullied cat can be an absolute lifeline. All right, let's bring it all back to the physical world, back to our cat on the subway floor. If you ever find yourself needing help in a crowded room, whatever you do not just yell, "Somebody help me," because that spreads the responsibility to everyone, which means no one. Instead, use this literal cheat code. Single someone out. Point right at them and say, "You the bear in the suit, please call 119." Or, "You the dog with the red backpack, help me lift this." By assigning a specific task to a specific face, you completely shatter the diffusion of responsibility. Because at the end of the day, understanding the bystander effect isn't just about learning some quirky psychology fact. It's about giving yourself the actual tools to overcome it. We are literally hardwired by biology and society to hesitate, to look around, to let the crowd decide. But now you know exactly how the freeze works. So I'm going to leave you with this. The next time the paper cat falls down right in front of you and the whole crowd goes dead silent, which animal are you going to choose to be? The one who just watches or the one who acts?
Knowledge grows through sharing. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe as we continue to grow together.